I'll set that up here. Take this off. Hey everybody, my name is Kenneth Kennedy. I am a grateful recovering alcoholic. It's good to be here, good to be sober today, and thank you, Daniel, very much for inviting me and having me here to your home group. It is an honor and privilege to be asked today for somebody alcoholic like me to do anything, especially something like this. I was always used to stay away, don't come back, and take that one you got with you. So it is an honor to be asked to do stuff like this today, be of service in any way. I'd like to thank everyone for attending the Zoom, everybody participating and being in this meeting. I know my home group has had some changes as well, but it's very important for me to be face to face with another alcoholic as much as possible. I got a sobriety date, December the 10th, 2006. I have a sponsor who has a sponsor, and I also am a sponsor. I have a home group, as Daniel mentioned it, the Shallotte group. We meet there every Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays at 5:30. We got some real good alcoholics down there. If you don't know what I'm talking about, just come to one of our business meetings. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about. I love my home group. I've been a member there for about 2.5, 3 years now. It seen the group grow. A lot of good new people. A lot of old timers down there too. Brought a home group member with me tonight. Pat, she's here with me. Thank you for riding up here and listening to our stories all the way up here. I know that's got to be painful. But, anyway, I don't know how many of y'all have ever done something like this, but I've done it quite a few times, and it never comes out the same, so I have no idea how this might come out tonight. It always seems to be something different, but I hope that I share something tonight that will inspire somebody or somebody can relate with somehow, some way. Of course, I was born at a very young age. I come from a very dysfunctional family. I'm the youngest out of 3 brothers and 3 sisters. Of course, me being the baby, I use that to my advantage as much and quite often as I possibly could. On my father's side, had a large family, had 9 brothers and 2 sisters over there. On my mother's side, she had a sister. And I was born in Pasquotank County, which is up around Elizabeth City, North Carolina. Was there for a relatively short time. We moved down to Calabash area, North Carolina, and stayed there until we moved to this little town called Longwood. And that's pretty much around that age there. I was around 7 when we moved there, and I remember my family, I can't label as alcoholics, but I'm guessing that chances are, from what I've seen as growing up as a very young child, they had a lot of problems with alcohol. I watched them, make their own brew and stuff like that in the sheds and farms and stuff like that growing up. I never had my first experience with alcohol was around age 10 years old. I one morning get ready to get on the school bus. I had a cousin that stayed next door, and he was a little older than me. And I remember walking over there to catch the bus one morning, and he invited me to a drink and a little something else to smoke. And I remember taking that drink and smoked a little something too. And I remember having a funny, weird feeling. I didn't enjoy the experience that I first had. I went on to school, got sick, fell asleep, pretty much didn't do anything the rest of the day, and felt miserable that whole day. I didn't swear off at that time I'd never do it again, but I was just something I wasn't inspired to do it again at any time soon after that. Until one night I got a little tap on my bedroom window, and there was a young girl that stayed in the neighborhood, and a friend of mine wanted to sneak out and go out riding. At the time I had some transportation. I had a 4-wheeler, so we could move around. They wanted to go out riding, and so I went out, and alcohol was involved, and I drank and smoked and done a few other things with the girl, and that was pretty much what it was all about all the way for the next 30-some years after that. So I was highly inspired from that drink then on. And I couldn't wait to get another opportunity or another chance to do it again. And that was pretty much how it taken off. Shortly after that, I don't recall having any problems hadn't started, but I remember hanging out with my cousin. We go down to the beaches. I was relatively close to the beach, about 10 miles. We'd hang out at Ocean Isle, Sunset Beach, Holden Beach, and stuff like that. And we would build bonfires. We'd have friends and stuff like that. And then we would, alcohol was always involved. And I enjoyed a lot of those experiences. I probably wouldn't be here if I didn't. And done that for a considerable amount of time until things started happening. Problems started getting involved. I remember before I turned 16, I never had a driver's license. I thought, I had a vehicle. And at the time I had a 64 Chevy step-side pickup. I was about 15 years old. And I remember drinking, and I told myself, I said, well, that truck will run whether I have a driver's license or not. And I drove it around and ended up getting myself in some trouble with that. And that was my first experience with the law. And shortly after that, I ended up purchasing another vehicle. And somehow or another, I ended up weaseling my way out of that situation with the law, and I ended up getting my driver's license. And I was drinking and driving at the time, and people were telling me I shouldn't be doing stuff like that, and ended up getting caught. And every time I ended up getting out of those situations, drinking and driving, up to that point, to around 21 years old. And started experimenting with a few other things that started escalating my drinking. And this is Alcoholics Anonymous meeting, and I respect Alcoholics Anonymous, so I'll keep my limit and share and centered and focused around my alcoholism, but there was a lot of other substances involved with that. And that started to cause a lot of problems. At this time, I'm around 18, 19 years old. I met this girl in high school. We started seeing each other, and we was hanging out, boyfriend, girlfriend type of deal. And she was watching me and the problems. And then I went to her one night, and I said, I think I might have a problem with this other stuff, and I want to do something about it. And so she came up with the idea that marriage would probably fix that. And so we did. I thought it was a good idea at the time, and so we did. We got married. And shortly after that, I don't know the exact length of time, it was I'm going to say within a year after the marriage, problems kept piling up some more. And so we kind of huddled up again, tried to come up with another plan. And we come up with another idea we both agreed on. We thought a child would probably fix me. And I don't suggest any of these things, especially if anybody's new here. They didn't work for me, and I've heard a lot of other alcoholics say it didn't work for them either. But so we had a child. And of course, obviously that didn't work. I was sharing with Daniel earlier today that the day that she was born, that's when we separated. And got a divorce after that. So none of those things worked. And then once we got a divorce, I felt like I was a free man. So that cousin that had turned me on to that first drink, he got separated from his wife. So we kind of made a connection and started working together. And so, of course, when we were working together and we were self-employed, we were drinking together too. And we would drink most of the night, every occasion, every opportunity we had. We'd drink, and then of course problems kept piling up, and I kept getting a little worse, and I remember his father, which was my uncle. I remember them making their own brew out in the shed, and I remember one day I said, "What are they doing?" He said, "Oh, they're making wine." I said, "Oh, really?" He's like, "Yeah." I said, "When will it be ready?" He said, "Oh, you'll know. It won't be long, but you'll know when it's ready." And I remember getting off the school bus. I forgot how the length of time, but I remember getting off the school bus, and I looked and I seen him out in the yard. I thought he was dead. He was out in the yard, passed out. I didn't realize he had been drunk until I got over to him. And when he rolled over, I could see the alcohol hit me. And I said, "Oh yeah, that wine must be ready." So that's how I found out that it was ready. And shortly after that, his bus, because he was in high school, his bus pulled up, and he was coming running across the yard to check on his dad. And he said, "Oh yeah, the wine's ready." He said, "Go home and try to get something to put some wine in." He said, "And I'll meet you back over at the shed." So I went home and poured out Mom and Dad's milk, Clorox, whatever I could find to put something in. So we went over and stole a bunch of wine. Two big things happened. I started stealing and drinking. All that combination of things played a big part in my addiction. And I still remember what that wine tastes like today. It tastes like Dawn dishwashing liquid. They were drunk when they made it and didn't get the barrel clean. They left a little bit of Dawn dishwashing liquid inside of it. So it was terrible. But it would do the trick. It would do the trick. It done the works, and that was all that mattered at that time. So done that, and like I said, got separated. Me and him started hanging out, partying together for quite some time. Then I met this, ended up falling in love with a stripper. I ended up meeting a stripper, and ended up meeting her and marrying her shortly after we met. I don't make those suggestions either. It didn't work too well. But we ended up staying together about 7 years, and that was the part that problems really started escalating, and I kept getting a little worse. Let me back up a little bit. Before I married that second wife of mine, started going in and out of treatment, detoxes, rehabs, jails, DWIs. I can't even remember everything. I know that my first experience with treatment was in Wilmington Treatment Center. Some of y'all may know where that's at. At that time, it was called the Oaks. No, excuse me, that was the detox. Excuse me, two big differences there. The Oaks, if you're going to be crazy, that's a real nice place to go. Trust me, it's like a luxury place, but I don't suggest going there. But I went up going there for 4 or 5 days. I remember seeing the people that was inside of there. I told myself, I'm not like them. They're a lot worse than I am. I don't have their kind of problems. They're doing other things besides what I'm doing. So that I made myself different than them. In and out of there a couple times. Went to Wilmington Treatment Center. I was there for about 6 days. I remember the counselor told me that I was a sick puppy, that I needed some serious help, that something more than what they had to offer me. They had told me I needed to go to some AA meetings and some other meetings, and made those suggestions. And I went. Went to one and thought I was cured after that, and never went back for quite a while. Ended up going to another treatment. I don't remember the name. It was a North Carolina ARC or something like that. And I went there for 28 days, and I just knew that if I'd done 28 days in that treatment, to be sure, I would be fixed or cured after that. And I could do 28 days. And the time I got out, my alcoholic thinking would tell me, you need to reward yourself. You can drink now, and you can be, drink socially. And because I had an idea that I was just a beer drinker. Beer is not alcohol. It took me a while to ever figure out beer is alcohol. And I was just telling myself I could just stop doing the other stuff. So ended up going, I don't know, multiple treatments. And I remember, matter of fact, I went to one up in the mountain part of North Carolina. Went there 3 times, and I stayed there at that one. I told myself if I'd stay there long enough, I'd become a sober alcoholic. I stayed there so long, I became the office manager. You can't make this stuff up, I'm telling you. And I made the office manager, and I told them, I said, well, I'm going to go home for a week. It's been a long time, about 18 months since I'd been home. So I went back home down to the beach, and of course when I got down there, I told myself, well, you need to reward yourself. So I did. And before I got back, they already knew about it and kicked me out. And that went on for a long time. Started going to some AA meetings. My first AA meeting was down at the Grissetown group, down in Grissetown area. I don't know if some of y'all know where that's at. I remember attending that meeting, and I would drive up, and I'd have alcohol in the truck. I'd have something to smoke in the ashtray, and I'd go in there and I'd hang out at those meetings and thinking I was going to become a sober alcoholic just by sitting in those meetings. It just never happened. And it seemed like to me I could always find somebody just as sick, if not sicker than I was, to come join me after the meeting. And there was a Grissetown little intersection. There's a stoplight there now. I remember leaving that meeting, and before we get to that stop sign or that light now, we'd done be popped the top, lit it up, and talk about how good the meeting was and how much we got out of it, and headed straight down into Myrtle Beach. And that's just what it consists of for years. And finally one day I remember in that meeting, there was an old timer there, a guy named Richard. Been there a long, long time. Their meeting topic was on willingness. And I actually listened, and it didn't make any sense to me. But I remember I knew him on a personal level, and I went to him after the meeting, and I said, how do you get this willingness that I hear y'all talk so much about? And he looked at me, and he said, it's pretty easy. He said, you just keep drinking until you do. Because if you don't have the willingness, chances are you ain't going to never get sober. I didn't know what that meant at the time. The willingness to go to any lengths. And so I knew I weren't willing. I was just trying to stop a few other things, but not my drinking. So I quit going. I stopped going to AA. Started running them basically on self-knowledge and self-will. Ended up meeting that second wife, thinking things was going to be different. And they were. I managed to keep myself regulated without catching any criminal charges or have any court cases for about 3 years. And I remember testing myself. I'd put myself through little tests. I'd buy a 6-pack of beer and put them in the refrigerator and see how long I could keep them in there without taking a drink. Just stuff like that. And of course that didn't work out too good. And one day I just finally, I forgot exactly what happened. I just basically gave up. Just gave up. And I said, you know what, I'm tired of trying. I've tried everything. There's no solution for me. There's no help. I gave up hope. And that's when I started getting dangerous. I got dangerous. I started getting violent. I had bad resentments and anger and so forth and so on. And we ended up getting a divorce, but not at the time. We separated and started catching a lot of criminal charges. Nothing too awful serious, but ended up going to prison. I went to prison for the first time. Caught some pretty, what I think is kind of some ridiculous charges. One of the charges was attempting to, to do a felony larceny with intentions of committing a felon, something like that. Anyway, they wrote me up for something like that. I ended up going to prison for 17 and a half months. And while I was there in 17 and a half months, I told myself, I said, the day and time that you get that low, that you go to prison, you're done. That's it. You're done. And you won't never have to worry about drinking or doing nothing else no more. You're through. And I told myself that. And while I was in prison, I drank, smoked, done everything else, thinking things was going to be different. And they were. They were a lot worse. A lot worse. I remember I went to Newport Correctional and was there for about 14 months out of 17 and a half. And went to a couple AA meetings. And the only reason I went to AA meetings there was because they had cookies and coffee. And February the 22nd of 2005, I walked out of that prison. I thought I was a free man. But mentally, I was more locked up than I was before I ever went in there. I walked out that morning at 7 a.m. At 4 o'clock that afternoon, I rewarded myself with a drink, because anybody needs a drink after doing 17 and a half months in the joint, right? But not an alcoholic like me. Because once I started, I couldn't stop. And I thought things was going to be different this time. And they were. A lot worse. 15 and a half months later, I stood right before another judge. I had racked up a whole lot more charges. Charges got more serious. A bunch of DWIs, all kind of larceny charges, fleeing to elude arrest, assault on government officials, all the good stuff, that comes with drinking and doing other things. And if I remember correctly, I think there were somewhere around, it was either around 42 charges, something like that. And I didn't think it was all that bad, to be honest with you. They thought a whole lot different, I promise you that, especially the judge. Now, I had a guy named Larry, who's into recovery down in Shallotte area. He came visit me at my brother's job, so I was working for him at the time. He kind of tried to save me. And I got real suspicious of him, thinking he might be a cop or something, because he was asking a whole lot of questions, and I wouldn't have anything he had to say. And next time I seen him, he was actually in the courtroom the day that I got sentenced. And told the judge, he said, Your Honor, he said, I've been and spoke with Mr. Kennedy a few days ago, and I've been trying to get him to come with us in our program. And he said, there's something about him I feel like it's worth saving. And if you, by your permission, if you'll turn him over, allow him to be in my custody, I'd like to take him and watch over him, and I believe I can really help this guy. And she said, well, Mr. Larry, she says, I appreciate you taking the time being here today, but if Mr. Kennedy gets any help, it'll be from the North Carolina Department of Corrections. So that's exactly where he's going today. And I got this real sick feeling. But they didn't sentence me quite that day. They gave me some probation, believe it or not. They allowed me to walk. My family enabled me a considerable amount. I had some of the two best parents. They gotten sober, but they got sober a little bit different than me in the program of Alcoholics Anonymous. And they tried to help me in that direction, and I just wouldn't have it. And but anyway, they had helped me get back. I think, if I remember correctly, I was out on 7 bonds in 30 days. They'd always come get me. I'd cry and manipulate. That's what I done. And they come got me out of jail, and they paid a bunch of restitution, bunch of money that I'd owed, and I walked on probation. Ended up staying out on probation 29 days. Violated my probation because I wasn't home at 7 o'clock because I had a 7 o'clock curfew. And they violated me, and that's when they sentenced me to prison. They gave me 128 months because I wasn't home at 7 o'clock. I try to be on time now, you believe me. I'm matter of fact, a whole lot early. But they sentenced me to that, gave me 128 months. I left from Brunswick County Jail, shackles and chains. There was 9 of us on a van, transport van. We went to Pender Correctional. 8 of those guys got off, and I stayed on. And when I was staying on the van, I just got a real sick feeling. I wasn't sure what was going on here, but I knew it couldn't be good. And I asked the officer, where were we going? He said, well, we were riding a little bit further than this. And we got a little bit further to go. And we kept on going, and I knew right then, I had an idea I was going to Raleigh. Now, my family had prophesied, as well as quite a few other people, because I had some of the best people known to mankind reaching out and telling me and trying to help me and save me and rescue me from what I was going through. And I remember them kept telling me, he said, well, if you don't slow down or stop, something real bad's going to happen. And if you get lucky enough, you're going to make it to the big house one day. Well, I did. That's exactly where I went, to the big house. I think Wallace talks about the big house. And went to Raleigh Central Prison. Went in there. That was an experience I hope I never forget. Went in there. They escorted me. Took me down this tunnel, went to this block. It was old death row at the time. Went in this unit, F block. Was up on the upper floor. number 111 cell, which was labeled FU 111. And I won't never forget that cell number either. Remember, my sobriety date was December the 10th, 2006. This was December the 8th, 2006. I got in that cell that night, and I had an experience. And when that door shut, a reality set in. There was nothing else left, nobody but me and that prison cell. And I still remember those doors still rattling in my head when they slammed shut. And I remember I didn't have because I was having all kind of crazy thoughts. Suicide weighed pretty heavy on my mind at that time, but I was too coward to do something like that. The only thing that hit me that night, once the lights went out, was ask something for help. And I remember getting on my hands and knees, and the moment that I got up off the bed, something happened. I felt something. And what I felt was just like a warm blanket with like something comfortable feeling, like everything was going to be okay. And I remember I just basically cried out and said, God, please help me. I don't know what to do. I just need some help. And how ironic it was, somebody come to my cell the next day and invited me to an AA meeting. Said he knew me. I'd never seen the guy before in my life. I like to think today he was an angel or some sort or something. I don't know, but I know that. And I turned him down 3 times. I told him, I said, the last thing I want to do is go to an AA meeting, and I'm 1 day on a 128-month prison sentence. That's the last thing I was thinking about. But I did. And when I went, we had some readings, and I read There's a Solution. And I remember reading There's a Solution, and something clicked. And what clicked in my head was, you mean to tell me there's actually a solution to my problems? And I remember the willingness, and for the first time in my life, I became willing to go to any length to get sober and stay that way. And that was my mark. That's the reason why I marked that next day, December the 10th, 2006, as my sobriety date. And from that on, through my journey in sobriety and through the prison system, I stayed active and got involved. But I didn't know anything about all that at the time. I ended up staying at Central Prison for about almost 2 months, got transferred, went to Wayne Correctional, and in Goldsboro, and that's where I met Wallace. First time I ever met Wallace, he was doing a speaker meeting like I'm doing tonight, and he spoke, and I could identify with him, and thought it was pretty cool because it was a few years later I seen him, ran across him again. But I went through treatment there, and I stayed 65 days, ended up getting transferred. I learned just enough the importance of home group, sponsorship, steps, service work, and sharing your experience, strength, and hope, even from the inside. And left from Wayne, went to Hoke Correctional, from Hoke to Columbus, from Columbus to Morrison. Got to Morrison Correctional, and when I walked up there, they had a introduction meeting. It was on a Wednesday, I remember that. It was early morning. Some of y'all remember Tom I. Matter of fact, he's a home group member here. He was there. He shared a little bit of bits and pieces of his story at that introduction meeting. He said, if you think alcohol had anything to do with you being here incarcerated, then you might want to look at that. And I did. He said, we offer a solution. Solutions here in the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, that's where I found my solution. That's what he was saying. And so I went up to him after the meeting, and we talked for a little bit. And I was still kind of wish-washy. I was still trying to figure out whether or not I really was an alcoholic at that time. I'm still very squirrely. And ended up, when I was at Columbus, I met a friend there, a guy named Jeff. He ended up transferring to Morrison. It was about 2 weeks later after that. And I remember him coming. I got with him on the yard. And he said, you know, I think I'm going to do this thing. He said, I said, what are you talking about? He said, I think I'm going to get involved and do the whole deal in Alcoholics Anonymous because I don't want to have to do this time in prison just to turn around and have to come back. And that was a slap in the face for me. And I said, you know what, I think I might need to do the same thing. and I ended up getting involved in it. I think the name of that group was Into Action Group. Started getting active, getting into action. Had a workshop. I remember, some of y'all may remember Richard P. I guess it's okay to mention his name, Richard Page. He ended up becoming my sponsor a little bit later on. They was announcing a workshop. Tom said that this workshop that they'd had before in the beginning in the prisons, the 10 in the very first workshop either was still sober that day or had died sober. So they had 100% success. And I told myself, yeah, I think that's something I might need to do right there. Now, trust me, I weren't too interested when they said workshop because I weren't trying to do a whole lot of nothing, to be honest with you, at the time. But I did. Ended up going through the workshop, going through the steps. I had a situation with a visit. I hadn't had a visit in about 2.5 years. And it happened so to be the same day that I was doing a fish step with somebody who I never met or seen. Didn't know who it was at the time. So I chose to go to the visit. I remember Richard telling me, pulling me to the side, that he thought I'd done a major mistake. Almost got a resentment. And so anyway, I ended up getting out of the workshop. I still come to the meetings, but the next workshop that was held, I ended up getting Jeffrey as my temporary sponsor because he went on through the steps. Richard was his sponsor. And Jeffrey ended up shipping out. We had worked together. We got, if I remember correctly, it's like step 8 and 9, and was working on that. And Jeffrey got shipped. I don't know how much y'all know about the prison system. You ain't nothing really but a number in there. They allow to pick you up, snatch you out, and send you wherever, God knows, all over North Carolina at any time. He ended up getting shipped. That next Wednesday meeting, Richard comes up to me and says, I understand Jeffrey had shipped out. And I said, yes. He said, do you understand I was Jeffrey's sponsor? And I said, yeah, I remember him mentioning that. He said, do you understand I'm your sponsor now? I said, no, I don't. He says, well, what do you think about that? I said, well, does it really matter? He said, probably not. Here's what I want you to do. And I was like, oh, crap. And but we got active, started going through the steps, went through the workshop, and I kept on going through the prison system. Ended up staying at Morrison for almost 4 years, and I learned a lot about service. I heard a lot of Tom's stories. I remember Tom every week would come, and he'd share every week where he'd been, meeting people, some of his experiences, always going here and there, talking. And I went up to him after the meeting one night. I said, you must be rich. You getting to go do all this traveling every week. It's something. He said, Sean, you probably got more money than I got. And I said, I know better than that. And I said, how do you do it? And he puts his hand on my shoulder and he says, Kenny, if you'll keep coming back, I'll promise you, you'll figure it out. Just keep coming back. And I did. 7 years later, I was at Wilmington, New Hanover County Correctional, at an AA meeting on the inside, and a lady named Donna B. was there, and she was talking about a circuit speaker that we have in the fellowship. And I went to her after the meeting, and I said, you know something, it just dawned on me. It's taken 7 years to figure out how Tom was doing all that traveling as a circuit speaker. And that's what he done. He dedicated basically his whole life for the Fellowship of Alcoholics Anonymous, and that meant a lot to me. And it took me, I'm a slow learner, it took me 7 years to figure out that. Anyway, I heard some things, like they told me that if I attended an AA meeting prior to getting released the first day, that I would increase my chances of never drinking again or going back to prison. Up in the 90-some%. And so I got released May the 20th of 2015. I like to think I was a free man, and I was physically. But I became a free man mentally when I started going through the steps and got a sponsor and started doing the whole ordeal. And it took the steps to help me to, matter of fact, my home group was talking about the step 9, making amends. And that part there was where I had to forgive myself, because I had done so much and I couldn't forgive myself. And that's what the steps done for me. It took some time, but once I done that, I started a new life, and I was set free. And but anyway, Daniel was my sponsor at the time. Right before I got released, he made a suggestion that I get another sponsor, and I did. And I had all that lined up, and a guy named Bill P. from Wilmington, and he was there at the gate on the 20th, as well as my daughter and a first cousin of mine. And I walked out of that prison. I remember having 2 little small bags. One was a bunch of old letters and my AA book and some AA literature and a few letters from Richard and a few others, and my walk-in papers that they gave me from the prison, releasing me from the North Carolina Department of Corrections. And I remember them giving me a debit card that had $123 on it. I ain't got much more than that now, but that's what I had when I got released. But it felt good. It felt good. I ended up going to a halfway house called the Links program, which was just outside, right down the street from the prison. I ended up going there, and but I remember that afternoon after walking out, being a good alcoholic I am, in my way of thinking, I told myself, I'm not just going to go to 1 meeting, I'm going to 2. Because I want to make double sure that I don't have to go back to that place. And so I did. And ended up joining another home group, which was at the Crossroads group there in Wilmington. Got active, got involved in service, so forth and so on. Ended up getting a job, and started my journey in sobriety on the outside. Been asked to do something like this quite often. The judge that had sentenced me in Brunswick County, I'm not sure if this county has it or not, a thing called drug court. But they had asked me to come down and speak, and I stood before the judge that had sentenced me to 128 months. And the experience I won't never forget, when I walked in that courtroom, she came down off the bench and gave me a hug and told me how good it was to see me and so forth and so on. And it was really heartwarming. Only Alcoholics Anonymous could do something like that for somebody. And she's passed away now. But I remember speaking in front of them and having that experience. I got involved in my home group. Bill pressured me and trying to be of service to another alcoholic. Ended up being the greeter there at my home group for some time. And then he kept pushing me to do corrections work. I put in a bunch of applications after my 12 months after I was released to fill out applications for not Columbus, but Tabor City Correctional. Filled out an application for there and got turned down. And it didn't discourage me. I had an idea they probably would. They didn't want nobody like me going back up in there for no reason. So some time later went by, and I remember a guy named Mark D. from the Midtown group in Wilmington. He's active in corrections. And he brought an application. And he said, fill this out. I said, I've been denied one time. He said, do it again. But we'll do it in Wilmington. See what happens there. And lo and behold, I filled an application there and got approved. And I went back into the prison system and was able to bring a meeting in there, which they already had. I told them, I said, I'm just here to attend y'all's meeting. This is y'all's meeting. And was allowed the honor and privilege of last August of last year, was allowed to go back in the prison system without catching any charges of any kind, and was allowed to go back in there and just sit in on a meeting every Thursday night until this COVID thing hit. And what an honor and privilege. My home group now, I try to be on time there all the time. I try to be early. Try to be consistent. Very important. Very important for an alcoholic. I guess, how much more time have I got? A couple more minutes? Where am I at in the time?
10.
10 more minutes? Okay.
I cut my phone off so it wouldn't interrupt you.
Okay, that's a good thing.
Time
Better be glad your phone didn't go off in here. But let's see. I know my home group, like I said, I've been that member of that home group there for almost 3 years now, and I do love my home group, and I try to participate and be of service as much as possible. I sponsor other men. I just try to do the best that I can in carrying the message. I was told that in order to keep what I have, I must give it away, and stuff like that. Today I try to stay green, and what I mean by that, I try to keep an open mind and try to continue to learn, because the day and time that I feel like I got this, I will die, I will rot, and I will die. And so forth and so on. I'm going to have to cut it short because I've done gone too far, and I don't want to.
You don't want to get drunk again.
I don't want to get drunk again. I'm sure y'all don't want me to get drunk again. That's for sure. But close with this, that if I thought sobriety would be as good as it is today for me, I would have tried a lot harder, a lot longer ago, that's for sure. And it is an honor and privilege to be sober today. I never would have thought in a million years that life would be so good. Thank y'all for letting me share. That's all I got.